to our poster session. Yes. Okay. So our first presenter. Are you here, Fernando?
Yes, I'm here. Hello.
Great. So you're here. Good. You have to unmute your. Yes, we can see you. Excellent. Okay, we have to get started. We want to make sure we are on time. And so this is our poster session 6. And the first presenter, Fernando, is going to present us his poster. We have, for the poster session, we have 2 minutes for the presenter to give us an overview and the rest of the 8 minutes to for discussion. And please, like before, put your questions in the chat and then I will take them up according to the order we received. So Fernando, are you zooming in from France?
Yes, that's it.
Yeah, great, welcome. So please go ahead and do your overview first.
Thank you. Hello, I'm Fernando Segui and I'm professor at the University Claude Bernard in Lyon, and especially at the Department of Teachers Training. I work with students who want to become teachers of primary school and also with teachers of primary schools. It means that they are not specialists in teaching music, but they have to teach music. I can say also that different researchers emphasize that music is the least taught in the discipline in schools, and it's also the discipline in which teachers feel the least comfortable. So my research started when I had to answer that question. How can I teach music to my pupils when I'm not specialist and even though I'm ignorant? I can say that the terms not specialist and ignorant are the terms used by the students. As you see in the poster, the first question I had to explore was the question of the representation they have about teaching music. And for them, it's a question of specialists because they don't know how to read music, to recognize or play instruments, and so on. So as André Jordan says, it's important to deal with those representations. It's important to know what are those representations in order to go against them, in order to work against those representations. They have to identify them in order to work with them and against them, also against them. The consequence of this is to work on this feeling of incompetence. So we have to identify their real degree of musical competence because they ignore that they have musical references, vocabulary, culture. They lack knowledge, but they have some competences. So we have to work with them in order to make them more comfortable, more confident. Then I propose them to work with medias, even they were not musical medias, like children's literature albums. They use it every day in schools, so I said them that those albums were also something like a score. Why don't we imagine the sound of the picture? That was some question that I can ask them in order to work with those albums. Why can't we do it with the pupils? It's the proposal called Affordance by Gibson. Divert an object from its primary function to use it otherwise. The purpose is to take an album for young children and in order to make it musical, not also from its first function of literature. That's the reason why I started researches in action with students and also teachers with their classes and help them to imagine music sessions in class that they are within their reach using media with which they are comfortable, like those albums. The conclusion of this experience are different. Um, for the pupils, it was very interesting to notice that the kids were very interesting in those musical stations, and they were more creative and make proposals that are beyond those the teacher. And at the end, I've noticed that teachers are more confident and feel more legitimate in teaching music in classroom because they started with something that they know better than also, only working on music medias. Okay, I can answer all the questions.
Thank you so much, Fernando. Okay, so let me first ask to clarify, because this is an international community, maybe not everybody are familiar with the system in France, because you mentioned the teachers who are, may not be musically trained, yes. They have to teach music. Is this at the primary level or secondary level? And
yes.
So can you tell us a little bit the background?
Yes, of course. In primary, I was talking about teachers of primary school. So it's for kids since 3 years old to 11. And then those teachers are not specialists. They are, in French, we call them polyvalents. Is that to say that they have to make lessons of French, of course, and mathematics, physics, and so on. I can say, but also I can say that in the programs of education, music is a part of the lessons that they have to do with the pupils, and we are a lot of researchers that we have noticed that it's very hard for those kind of teachers to practice music with the kids, also because their representation of musical education is for them it's very hard to practice with the pupils.
I see. Okay, so so they are just the classroom teacher for primary school, right? In secondary school, the music teacher will be different.
Yes, that's it. In the secondary, yes, they are specialists. I work also with the students who want to become a music teacher in secondary school, and they are specialists of music. So for them, it's easier to make music with the pupils.
Yeah, okay. I see that there are some questions here in the chat now. And they ask you, how long has your project been going on, and what was the method you used?
Oh, it's since 5 years. So I was working with so students and also teachers for 5 years, and we made we call it here in France research and action research. So we work together before classrooms, and then I go to the classroom of the teacher, and I see how the teacher is doing the work with the pupils. So it's work before and after the classroom with the pupils.
I see. Yes, let me see. Yes, I think perhaps the method used, perhaps the teaching method. So how was the teachers like the teaching methods? And I think perhaps the question is about teaching method.
Sorry.
Is it? I think that about the teaching method. How about the teaching method?
Yes.
So do the teachers construct the music lesson with the teaching methods?
Yeah.
particular teaching methods?
Yes, we work together on the teaching lessons because they are. It's very hard for them to find a good media to work with the pupils on musically speaking. So I told them that it was better to start with something that they use every day, like an album for young children, and it's interesting to think the media differently in order to thinking like a musical media. So we started like this, and then they feel more comfortable to work with the pupils.
Thank you so much, Fernando. Thank you so much for sharing your interesting work. Okay,
Thank you.
so I see time is out. Thank you. So we are on to the next presenter. Claire, are you here?
Yes, I'm here.
Hi, Claire, welcome. So you are also in France now?
Yes, hello, thank you.
Oh, yeah.
So,
so another French presentation.
It's
Thank
my first
you.
English
Claire,
presentation.
So it's time now.
So,
Thank you.
Can you hear me? Yes?
Yes.
So, it's my first presentation in English, so I'm sorry for my poor English and my French accent. So, this research is about how and why using problem-based learning, defined by Philippe Mérieux, in musical teacher training. The experimentation took place in the Lifelong Learning Teacher Training Program at CFEDEM Aura, leading to the Music Teacher State Diploma. For me, what this experience emphasizes is above all the preponderance of the habits that we have as musicians. It's edifying to see every time we offer this workshop with the Pibroch notation, how classical music theory is important for our students and works as a filter preventing them from looking at the musical object which is in front of them. Indeed, what is encoded in this Pibroch score, if I understood the principle of this music, if there are Scots here, they have to correct me, but this score is for the ornaments and the way to play them with the bagpipe. It's not solfegetic notation, but none of the students have hypothesized about this Pibroch notation other than to interpret it as traditional music theory. This signs an implicit representation. It would seem that any musical medium written must be for them reference to the solfège of 19th century. However, this solfège precisely encoded the music of the 19th century. This music being itself inseparable from the way it was practiced. This code, in France in any case, is often taught as if it existed dissociated from the musical context in which it is inscribed. On the other hand, it's still too often thought of as a prerequisite for any formation of musician, whatever the aesthetic. This idea makes non-reader musicians more ignorant than others, so they see themselves as being unable to enter into the complexity of music, even as unwritten music represents the majority of music in the world. So for me, this vision causes a de facto inequity between musicians by setting up a sort of hierarchy of practices. If I go a little further, what this experience shows to me is how we are stripped of our knowledge and our representation, and how this prevents us from approaching other socio-musical knowledge and entering it. We could go so far as to say that this prevents us from entering a musical culture that is different from ours, and thus from meeting the other persons as representing other cultures. After the experience, the students testify that they were able, thanks to the workshop, to start identifying their own filters and thus be more attentive to the culture in which each of their pupils evolves. They also realize that any score that is not placed in its precise musical context does not allow us to enter into a scholarly musical knowledge.
Thank you.
So if you
Thank
have
you
questions.
very much, Claire. Yeah, so it's question time. Please type your question in the chat box. And maybe I can start with asking you, because the title of this paper is problem-based learning. And why do you think problem-based learning is good for music education? And why did you choose this as your focus, as your pedagogical concept in music teacher training?
So it's a problem of representations. So I think to solve an unknown problem, we have to evolve our representations. So if teaching is about enabling pupils to learn, therefore allowing their representations to evolve, so we had to find something to do with students that ensure them to see their own implicit procedures and representations. That's why we choose this pedagogical concept.
Mm-hmm. So I see that people are, our friends are asking about, do you have an example of teaching music with problem-based learning? What songs are you using? And give us more concrete examples.
Oh, teaching music with So the example I took here was about pibroch notation. It's a special notation for Scots Highlands bagpipe, and it's something near solfegetic notation, but it's not. And it's interesting because our students have to change their representation, because they are thinking it's solfegetic notation, but it's not. And so.
Mm-hmm. So is that the problem is for them to figure out how to read this particular notation? Is that what you mean?
Yes. What you can see up and right, it's to code ornaments. It's a way to code ornaments that have to be played with bagpipe. And it's not to sing or other way. And during the workshop, students try to sing this, but it's not for singing. And they are looking for bars, for example, but it's no bars. There is no bars because it's only a way to write, to how say that, to remember how play this music. It's not really notation. It's only for remember.
Oh, okay. I see. Very interesting. Okay. There is time for one more question, and I was looking at the chat. Can you tell us more about the way the workshop developed and was conducted? So can you tell us about the workshop?
Yeah, the workshop takes place for 6 hours, one day, and it was in 3 parts. They work in a group of 4 persons, and they have to give an interpretation of this unknown score. And they have only what you see up to work. And they have to note on a logbook, minute after minute, all reactions, all ideas, all choices that they made by the group, in order to keep a written record of how they did it. And the second part, 1 hour. Each group makes its production heard and explain how it went about achieving this interpretation. And third part, 3 hours. They listening to the original recording and explanation of the particular notation of the Pibroch, debate leading to the formulation of 3 issues raised by this workshop. They have to do this. And we meet all together after this and have discussion about all this experience.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I see that this is really interesting. A lot of us have put comments and saying this is a very interesting and great work. So thank you very much for sharing with us this your work. And unfortunately, we don't have more time for it, but you can continue to check the chat and continue the conversation. And as I said to everyone, there's MISTEC Facebook to continue any conversation in future. Thank you, Claire. And we will have to move on to, move on to Matthew. Are you there, Matthew?
Yes, hi, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Hi. Oh, I've already seen you talking a little earlier in the discussion session. So you are talking to us from New York?
Yes, I teach in New York. I live in New Jersey, right on the border, and I do teach public school, grades 6, 7, and 8.
Okay, so up to you. It's your time now.
Thank you very much. So thank you to MISTEC and thank you all for listening today. What you see in this poster is a continuation from my dissertation. And in my dissertation, I spoke with 6 orchestra teachers and 27 of their students over a period of several months about the music that we play in school. And since then, I've spoken with choral teachers and band teachers and general music teachers at all different levels. And when it comes to the music we play in school and study, the way I view this is sort of as an ethical dilemma of, well, to what degree does the teacher have the power and authority to choose based on the curriculum? And to what degree does that allow the student to be represented in the curriculum and their music making? So in that very small diagram that you see under framework and rationale, what I try to express to you is the space in between the teacher and the student, where I think is very fruitful space for dialogue to happen and to uncover the messiness of the situation of how we as teachers, together with our students, can embrace a dialogical approach and in fact an ethical dilemma of what we choose as literature. In fact, whatever we choose means that several things are not chosen. And so why is it that we choose not to choose certain things? And how do we include our students in the process? So what you see on the right, the embracing of complexities of the who, why, and how is kind of an extension of the what and the when. As I said, when we think about what and when, it's what pieces and when are we going to do them? But I'd like to move us from the what and when to the for who, why are we choosing and why are we not? And how might we open up that really fruitful and interesting space of dialogue? So when I've spoken with teachers, there are many things that they're concerned about and try to do to different levels of success. Cultural relevance, cultural sustaining pedagogy, representation and demographic diversity. For some were very important and for others, frankly, very, very much not. And when it comes to cultural relevance and representation, we can borrow this idea from James Banks and multicultural education of content integration. This is almost a topic du jour right now, given that kind of the world is on fire with who is and who is not represented in our curriculum. And it's a very important topic to be sure, and especially when it comes to major large ensembles, there's certainly a featuring and a prioritizing based on the history that we have and the selectivity of kind of hiding behind this idea of quality and what does quality mean and whose music. It's very common, we know, to see a series of white male composers featured on a program. And some teachers spoke eloquently about how they counter that, taking time to establish an understanding of their community through music that might represent them and also open up a portal for who they may not be. So for example, in literature circles, we see the mirror and the window concept. How do you see yourself and how do you see other people? But it's very challenging to do that in large ensembles. In fact, some large ensembles have small pull-out lessons or sectionals or labs. And those were very fruitful spaces for people to engage in conversation at a more intimate level. Typically, if you have a class of 80 in a large band, it can be very difficult to have this sort of conversation of who are you? Tell me about yourself. What are some of your goals? What would you like to learn in our class? A lot of teachers use informal and formal requests of trying to tell us tell us what you're interested in learning and why. Some sight reading, go through a whole bunch of pieces and then have students voting and surveys. Voting was a very interesting topic. I'm sure we'll have some questions about it. But in the topic of equity, voting is oftentimes equitable and oftentimes not. And so a lot of teachers and their students wrestled with the idea. So I think the overall picture of what I'm trying to show is while we're trying to include students and show that window of the window and mirror, it's actually very complicated to do. And I want to embrace the messiness of the situation. So I can take some questions now, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Matthew. Very important issues you are raising. So I see there are some responses in the chat box, and let me see. So a question from Joy. Oh, yes, moved. Let me see where it is now. Oh, yes. Have you considered regarding cultural relevance, representation, and diversity, culturally responsive teaching? As I personally think multiculturalism just scratches the surface.
Oh, thank you. Yes, I've considered it, and I also do agree. This is not only about multiculturalism. In fact, I think we get into a large rabbit hole when we talk about that, of tokenizing and saying, oh, I'm going to play music from a particular region. I mean, this happens with food all the time, food and festivals. I'm eating Peruvian food, I'm eating Chinese food, I'm eating American food. And the conversation of, well, what is that and how do we engage? Like Marcia Baxter and Ji-Young Oh, I think her name was, yesterday, spoke about this junction of ethnomusicology and music education. And so I think if we look at the power dynamic, and I look at Bordeaux as cultural capital and trying to break this idea of whose music and why are we choosing what we're choosing to engage within our classrooms, it goes beyond culture into a larger power dynamic as well.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and then another question, so important to put the why, who, and how. Great work. How did the student motivation and engagement change when you implemented this approach?
Oh, yeah, so because I was working in different classrooms, obviously with many different students and observations, I saw a range of different motivations. One, in fact, was maybe some claims by students that if, in fact, they were more represented, they would be more engaged. And I've not looked into whether or not, and how that was the case. But I actually did see it with some. A particular example was in one school that was predominantly African and Caribbean American. And their teacher was as well. And they chose to not only play music by Chevalier de Boulogne and St. George, a Black composer, but they also did research on the topic as well in conjunction with their social studies curriculum on slavery. It was very important for students when they spoke to me about seeing themselves in the curriculum and how they can actually be included in this world of music education. And they were so motivated that they in fact chose to extend their learning, and many of them shared other pieces with me that they were interested in learning about through studying Chevalier de St. George.
Mm-hmm. Okay, another question. How do you find musically and technically appropriate music from a diverse representation of composers? In the band world, there is not a lot of diversity in the beginning levels, and orchestra world too.
This is a very timely topic, and that same teacher that programmed Chevalier de St. George lamented the lack of breadth of musical literature that was kind of sponsored and told, again, this idea of quality, of what is good music. When we look at state and national manuals of what people can perform at state contests and festivals, or what is considered to be appropriate for a music curriculum, there are hidden figures and missing voices. And I think what we see right now is a push for publishers and for composers, arrangers to be better represented in the field. But also music from many areas of the world as well. Unfortunately, this does come with some complexities. So there was one composer who kind of advantaged this system 2 years ago by coming up with a pen name that was of a Japanese female. And he, as a white man, profited greatly from that situation of saying it was a pen name, but well-meaning music educators who chose to engage, who wanted to do more for their students in this way, kind of just bought the piece and presented it to their students as though it was written by a Japanese female. Another case for music educators to do research with ethnomusicology, so we don't actually just take the piece that we see and put it in front of the students, that we explore it and know what we're doing. So at the same time, there's this push for diversity, we have to be very careful about the work that we do to make sure that we are comprehensive and is it technically appropriate for the level of technique and to help our students grow? Is it interesting? Does it help our students grow comprehensively as musicians? Can we research that together? Personally, I do composer baseball cards with my students often. We write to composers as well. We feature their work. And it allows us to do both and more, windows and mirrors.
Thank you, Matthew. This is really very interesting and this timely important topic. Thank you. So unfortunately, our time is up. So I want to thank you and invite our next presenter up. Thank you so much, Matthew.
Thank you very much.
So Rolando, are you somewhere? Can you unmute yourself?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Hi, welcome.
Hi.
Yes,
Hi.
so you are zooming in all the way from Chile?
Yes, of course. Chile.
Wow, great. We look forward to hearing more about your work. Please.
Okay, thank you. Hello, everybody. Or, well, I wishing to be in Finland, Moika. Well, I am Rolando Ángel Alvarado. I am Doctor of Humanities and Social Science, and I work now in the Alberto Hurtado University in Santiago of Chile. Well, in these 2 or 3 minutes, I'd like to talk about an improvement plans implemented in the Alberto Hurtado University with intention of broadening the access to an engagement with music education research in teacher education programs in Chile. It's important to highlight that Chile is the longest and southernmost country in the world. These characteristics are favorable in terms of cultural diversity, but they are problematic for establishing collaborative bonds among organizations situated within and outside Chile. Some of the problems are centered on dissemination activities, because on the one hand, there is a scarcity of national events focused on music education research, and on the other hand, undergraduate theses are held in libraries belonging to different universities than granted the bachelor's degree. That is, student teachers cannot consult theses published on paper by other universities, which is a problem because encapsulated knowledge becomes practically unusable. In addition to this, it's relevant to indicate a centralization of teacher education programs, as from north to south, the first undergraduate program is imparted more or less in Estonia, according to the illustration included at the left side. In other words, there is no program in Finland, which is a barrier for undertaking music education research projects in the north zone of Chile. With the intention of starting to solve this isolation, in 2019, we established negotiations with Guillermo Rosabal Coto from the University of Costa Rica, achieving to participate 3 times in their virtual international seminars in music education research for free. In the slide, you can see below the poster of the 3rd event in the center, which was so special because Chile has immersed in a deep social crisis at that moment. In the middle of such social uprising, we also achieved to carry out the first Chilean Congress for students of music pedagogy in a virtual format for free too. All of these events were useful for music education research because, at least at our university, Student teachers are interested in continuing their postgraduate studies, either in Chile or abroad, mainly in areas related to music pedagogy, sociology, and psychology. Likewise, they have expressed an interest in publishing their thesis in scientific journals because it will help them to obtain postgraduate scholarships. It's important to report that some students, teachers are even willing to carry out research activities when no funding or academic responsibilities are offered. That is, the engagement in music education research is not only linked to academic compliance, but also related to individuals' passions for the activity. This is my presentation. Thank you very much for the time and the space.
Thank you, Rolando. This is very good to have a representative from your part of the world and in the seminar. And so now I'm waiting. People can put in their questions in the chat box. And for now, I'd like to, because you mentioned about this is really the world, including your country, is going through a crisis here. And so you want to tell us more about how at your university, you are handling this crisis of the pandemic and organizing virtual lessons and seminars?
Well, the first crisis in Chile was a social crisis for inequalities. This was a difficult moment because we are living many curfews, incidents in the streets, on the streets was really hard moment. The different emotions are surging, different emotions arise on people, on our students. Many people started to regret participate in our first Congress. Was very difficult moment actually, because in addition to this event was programmed for in-person participation. So we need to change, adapting the event for a virtual format. And fortunately, many people also could express an interest for participating. We recruit some researchers, some doctors from Chile. For example, Jimena Valverde, Felipe Zamorano, who participated sharing their researchers, their doctoral researchers. Well, unfortunately, this event was great. You can see in YouTube, in our page, in our channel of YouTube. And now we are preparing the second Congress. And it's really important because we have presented the event 2 weeks ago, and the first day we have received proposals. So it's motivating for us because it's a signal that we are doing our good work, because the people is interested in the event, despite all the conflicts that we have the last year, and now the pandemic situation. Now we are preparing for carry out the event in a virtual format. So it's easier, the organization. It's easier the organization than the last year. Imagine the last year we have different scholarship for the different student teachers from Chile participating in that event. Like our country is the longest country in the world, we have different food scholarship and paid rent for different students from different regions of the north or the south. But all this money cannot be reparted because the event was adapted to virtual format. Now we can put this money in the virtual, in a good platform, a good website, in a good Zoom platform or other company, I don't know. But we have different options now in this crisis. We are more prepared than the past for confronting this pandemic crisis.
Yeah, okay. So we have just very little time for one question. And what is the biggest problem to teacher education program in Chile?
Well, now the social inequities, actually, because it's really hard like I put it in the chat, it's really hard to teach a piano when the students doesn't have a piano at home. It's really difficult because families have no money for buying instruments. Musical instruments are expensive for a classical family in Chile. So this is our more complex challenge now. Universities are trying to do different mechanisms for solving these problems, but it's not enough because the scholarships are oriented to pay, for example, the bills of internet or provide laptops. But the student needs guitars, classical guitars, pianos, recorders, and unfortunately, my university doesn't have money for covering all these things. I think this is the most challenge now with the pandemic situation. But in a typical day, in a typical reality, the most critical problem is related to the isolation. Universities do not construct a network. Every university works for itself. And now we are trying to change this situation with the intention of provide a network and a collaborative network. We can learn about other universities. We can learn about other experience for confronting this situation, this crisis, this social or pandemic crisis. We can learn about other universities from Latin America even, from Europe also, because Spain is living some similar situation. They also have the problem with the internet, with the instrument, and so we can construct a network, a collaborative network, worldwide level.
Yes, a great idea. And I see that also in the chat rooms, some of our colleagues was mentioning we should connect to MISTEC and to see what we should do worldwide, because that is the problem, not just in your countries, in many places in the world. But thank you so much for being here and sharing your work and with us. Thank you, Rolando.
Thank you very much. I hope you have fine and safe and healthy in this difficult time.
Thank you.
Boyka.
Thank you.